Guys, Oregon is a beautiful state that's very green for one reason. It rains a lot. Thankfully, our friends at Vessi have a solution to wet, cold feet with their incredible 100% waterproof, not water resistant, waterproof sneakers. They are stylish and incredibly comfortable. Vessis are made from Dymatex, a dual climate knit that keeps you cool in summer and warm in the winter. You won't believe it. They're waterproof. These sneakers are made to be worn daily and are super easy to clean. Now you can play in the rain and jump in the puddles without any concern. I highly recommend you give these a shot. You won't be disappointed. Vessis are now my go-to shoe. You will find 3 pairs of these by my front door. Check them out in the link below and use my code Chael to get $25 off your Vessi shoes. Let me start with this. I am not the guy that's ever going to break a story. If I ever break a story, it's on accident. I've had people call me to give me scoops on stories before, and I'll tell them, I go, hey, you might want to take that to Ramondi, or you might want to get that to Helwani if you want to get it out. I'm pretty good at going to the studio. I'm pretty good at making content, but you know, I got my set times. If you need to get this out right away, go to one of those guys, and those guys like to do it. Like, that gives them a little bit of a charge. If you're an insider, it gives you a little bit of a charge to break a story. You take it to them. Then down the road, maybe they'll do you a favor. I'm not really break story guy, but I only bring that to you guys because I don't think Paul's fighting Woodley. That story's going around. I cannot confirm it, but I'll just share with my opinion. Now, by the time, and it's going to take me about 2 hours to record into this little microphone, get all this sent off to Ryan, get it what's called processed and posted to the world of YouTube, I'm going to be 2 hours late, and I might be looking like a fool, particularly considering the fact that as I sit here right in this chair, the little dirt sheets that I go to say that Paul is fighting Woodley, but I don't know that I buy it. I'm light on it. I don't know that it's true. There's just a few things within that story that would catch me off guard. And first off, I must tell you, it's not the fight. I would stop what I was doing. I would love that. I'm already on Team Paul, as you guys know. I've been buying into this guy a little bit quicker than other people. That would impress me. If he says, because right now, Paul's as good as he says he is. He's as good as he says he is. And every time we tell him, oh, you're saying more than you really are, he steps in there and backs it up. So now we all have to stand back and go, okay, you're as good as you say you are. Are you good enough to compete with Tyron Woodley? If he says yes and then signs to do it, we have to accept that. That in large part is the fight business in and of itself. A large part of the pie is you get a whole bunch of guys who say they are something. You get other guys to say the same thing. You get the public to say one of them's right and one of them wrong, and then you get them to go out there and figure out who's right and who isn't. That's largely what this game is. I was coached by a guy named Mark Schultz. First jiu-jitsu I ever did in my life was with Mark Schultz, who was a black belt, and he trained under Walt Bayless and he trained under Pedro Sauer. Now, Pedro Sauer at one time, and I'm taking you back to a year called 1995, there was only 6 Rickson Gracie black belts in the entire country in North America. There was 6. Pedro Sauer was one of those 6, and he opened up a gym in Orem, Utah. It's about 45 minutes, and so Mark Schultz used to train with him. Now, let me rephrase what I just said. Mark Schultz was a black belt. Mark Schultz trained under Pedro Sauer and Walt Bayless. I did not say Walt Bayless and or Pedro Sauer gave him his black belt, because they didn't. Neither one of them gave him his black belt, and for whatever reasons, they didn't feel that he met whatever qualifications and certifications there was. Oh, maybe I should mention for you, Mark Schultz is the Olympic champion. Mark Schultz is the world champion. Mark Schultz was an NCAA champion. So there's no question that he could go out there and compete, but there was something within the rules and nuances of jiu-jitsu. They never gave him a black belt, so he went and got one at Mervin's. You remember that department store? There was like Mervin's and Meyer and Frank. This was Mervin's, and Mark Schultz went in and he bought one. And then he showed up to jiu-jitsu events with his belt, which I could not explain to you how much you would be laughed at if you tried to do that. There was even some guy, some real ball buster, that would go around and bust fake black belts. He'd like take a camera with him and then challenge them on the spot. I always looked down on that guy. I didn't think that was a cool thing to do. I thought he was humiliating somebody who was just trying to have their little gym and live within the confines of their own imagination, which I don't know that we need to go around and bust people like that. I think we can just talk about them behind their back like everybody else. It seems to me that that's the appropriate way to do it. But one guy used to actually go in and film this. If he would have tried to do that to Mark Schultz, he would have left without an arm or a leg or whatever else Schultz just decided to take off. This dude was one of the baddest guys in the world. He got a black belt, but he was never given his black belt in a traditional ceremony. I bring that to you because a guy, as long as he's willing to back it up, a guy is as good as he says he is. And if Jake Paul signs on to fight Tyron Woodley, I would be impressed. I would stand back and go, wow. That doesn't mean I would pick Paul. We could break that fight down as it gets a little bit closer. We're talking about something different here. We're talking about a guy who says that he has a dream, says that he's willing to work really hard in the gym, has a lot of people supporting those two claims, and then is willing to step in there with the best fighters he can find. I would be impressed. Did I just describe any of you? By the way, my phone rang during this whole thing. During this whole Jake Paul thing, I get a phone call. Hey, Chael, you want to fight Jake Paul? The answer to that is a little bit more complex. I don't ever hear, do you want to fight? You put any name on the back end of that. Back when I wanted to compete, it did not matter what that, do you want to fight, comma, you put any first and last name you want, I would have my answer prior to hearing the first and last name. It would just be internal. Chael, do you want to compete? Which I then would have to back off and go, Chael, do you want to work this hard? That's how I would hear the question. And it would have nothing to do with what the first and last name were at the end of that sentence. Do I want to compete? Do I want to get in the gym? Do I want to sacrifice? Do I want to work hard? And that's where you got to start to scratch your head. For a large period of my life, I never needed to think about that. But a little bit later, right, after I'd done it enough times, it started to become a question. So, and the other person on the end of this phone, and I'm sure you could guess who it was because I'll give you two guesses, and there's only two decision makers in this entire sport, so it was one of the two of them, but they said, do you want to fight Jake Paul? Do I want to go work that hard? Do I want to work that hard? And secondly, I have an ego too. My ego is going to be directly related to how many people showed up to watch that fight. I'm going to get into the ring and I'm going to look left and right. And if I see any seats that are empty, it's going to affect me. So it all comes back to, how did I respond to this question? Do I want to fight Jake Paul? Do I want to go into training camp? Do I want to sacrifice? Do I want to work hard? Do I want to do these things and attempt to win, right? I said, I'll fight Jake Paul if you can guarantee me Mike Tyson. If you can guarantee me, if I beat Jake, I get Tyson, I'm in. I said, well, Chael, why would that be important? I said, well, first off, don't worry about that because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you don't have Mike under contract. Trust me when I tell you, Mike will be on board with this. But as I see it, in my opinion, Jake Paul is in one hard spot, and it's not to bring in a crowd. It's to bring in a meaningful fight as to why are we here. Because in this sport, why we are here is directly related to the belt or a contendership to get you to the belt. And that's not the path that Jake's on. That's not the path he's ever going to be on. Right? The Olympic Games are coming up. Nothing what Jake is doing is to get into that tournament and go and represent the country. Just by example, he wants big fights where people are going to tune in. He's got some skills. He believes it. He's willing to risk it. And that's it. And I feel that the one piece of that story that's missing is purpose of why are we here, of which is a problem that I will solve if I fight him. We're here to fight Mike. We're not going to leave with the belt. We're not going to make up a fake championship. And we've seen that happen many times in combat sports. Conor and Floyd, and all of a sudden they bring out some fake belt. We're not doing that. But it still would satisfy the purpose and it would solve the problem. Because don't forget, there's still a problem in this if you're Jake. I'm telling you what I would need to do it, but what do you need if you're in Jake's spot? If you want to do fair business with somebody, you got to make sure he answers that question too. And the problem that Jake is going to have is, Jake, why are you fighting a 40-year-old Chael? So we could stop the pundits in their tracks with the age issue by steering into it. In fact, going either further, this is about, and even don't bring up 40-year-old Chael because we're talking about 53-year-old Mike. And it would just stop everything in its tracks. And it was the same thing would work in reverse for me. Well, hey, don't you think that Paul's a little bit too young? I'm not thinking of his age at all. As a matter of fact, I'm going after somebody twice his age. And Mike, that's what this is about. It's about Mike. Winner gets Mike. Bring me Mike. I'll deliver myself for Paul. Those are my terms. Best as I know and where this left off, I have never been told no. Now, that doesn't mean in this sport that it's working towards a yes, right? The leaders will get out there and they'll try to find as big as they, and they won't tell anybody. Nobody will know, and we'll all get a press release all on the same day. Like if it was going to be me versus Paul, winner gets Mike Tyson, that would all come at a press conference and I would find out the same time that you guys did, but it still adds to the reasons I'm a little light on the idea that it's going to be Paul versus Woodley, because I know, at least in my own proposal, what I proposed had an added element, which is where do we go from here? And in promotion, yes, you can put on an event. There's a huge difference in event organizers and promoters. An event organizer puts on a one-time thing. A promoter tells a story. The great promoters tell great stories, and with my proposal, I offered a very good story that I don't believe somebody else is going to beat me at. I just don't think there's going to be a better story there, because we will be left at why are T. Wood and Jake fighting? Is it just for fun? I check that box. I think that that's fun. Is it about seeing where Jake's at? I think that would satisfy, yes. I think T. Wood getting in there. Is T. Wood looking for something? I mean, you're right. It starts to solve a whole bunch of things, but what is the tie-in to Tyron Woodley, aside from the fact that he was a cornerman of Ben Askren? I'm stuck. I don't know. And I don't know that you need more than that. I just suspect for you that what I offered for you a moment ago would be a little bit more than that. And so I don't know if these two are going to come together. And I got to tell you, and I've never revisited this, and I'm really not looking to now. I'm going to scratch the surface of something, then I'm going to walk away from it. But there was something about Askren versus Paul that didn't seem right. I'm not going to further that thought beyond that. There was something within that match. If you watched it that night, or you watched the replay of it, or you go and you find yourself the YouTube clip out there, there's something about that match that didn't seem right. And I'm not the only one that's saying this. And I'm not the only one that noticed this. And if we're doing any kind of wrestling and we got any kind of an elbow and a wink and we stay with somebody within the same camp, I don't know, man. I'm light on the idea. I'm light on it. And I would like to see it. And I do think it's very interesting. I particularly like the aspect that it would give Tyron Woodley something one-dimensional to focus on. I just think that could rejuvenate him. I've seen guys do it in reverse. Cowboy Cerrone started to really lock in on grappling by example, but he said it rejuvenated his career. I think that T. Wood would have the same thing. Go in the gym, do something similar, work really hard, have a big goal, but it's still different. It's different. Boxing is different than MMA. That could rejuvenate you. I like that side of it. I think that T. Wood is owed something for all the great memories that he's given us to this sport. I'd like if we could give something back to him, and possibly that's it. If I'm to make my prediction, though, why are we here? What is the story that we're telling, and where do we go from here? Because there's a few real big names in boxing right now. Jake Paul's one of them, but there's a few real good boxers who have also returned to the sport. Now, don't try to break down their weight classes. Mike Tyson would fit that bill, and so would Oscar De La Hoya. As a matter of fact, of all of the guys that are coming back, and I know Evander's talked about it and alluded to it, but he hasn't actually done it, I think that Iron Mike and Oscar are your two biggest. And I think that Paul would like to have to eventually take one of those guys down and prove this point once and for all. And I don't know what Paul's final crowning moment could be. Like, he's now under contract with Showtime. I don't know if he wants to start working his way through the rankings and see a top 10 guy, a top 5 guy finally get in there for a world championship. Maybe he captures it, or maybe he leaves face down embarrassed like the rest of us. I don't know, but ultimately there has to be some kind of a crowning moment. You guys know I like the Olympics. Here we are in Olympic year. We got these great athletes all over, but we're going to whittle it down and we're going to bring them all together. And we've all agreed as a society, we're going to set 21 days aside every 4 years. In this case, it's going to be this year, and we're going to recognize and crown somebody. And most of those athletes are never going to see the mat again. They're never going to step on a court or put on a jersey again. That was their crowning moment. And it worked or it didn't work, but that was the moment. This is what this is all for, this moment, and however it falls, I'll rest my legacy on that. I don't know where in the story and for whoever is promoting Paul, what they have in mind for that being. Because there has to be a moment. There has to be the Olympic, the March Madness, the world title, the Madison Square Garden, the Mecca, the big one that it's all about. There has to be. Otherwise, you're just a guy out there, right? That's not a great life. I'm going to go put gloves on and try to hurt this person across, or they're going to try to hurt me. And eventually you see what I'm saying? There has to be a moment. There has to be a point. There has to be a story being told. I think that Paul has some very smart people around him. And if he has chosen to take on T. Wood, I'll sit back and I'll listen. I would encourage them to have a point. Where does this take us from here? What do we get for this? There's no belt. Is this about do we just solve a problem with boxing and wrestling? Is that what Paul versus Askren was about? Is this now boxing versus MMA and T. Wood stepping in? Is that the story? Is that what this is about? I'll listen. I'm open to the idea. I would rather it was a contendership match. And if it's not going to be a contendership for a world championship, then it needs to be a big prize. I submit for you a big prize would be Mike Tyson.